It's a date that's marked by unimaginable tragedy and resilience. While many people are familiar with the general events of that day, the attacks, acts of heroism, and the aftermath, there are several surprising details that are often overlooked. Well, in this video, we aim to shed some light on these, with 5 things you may not know about 9/11. If you would like to donate to an incredible 9/11 charity, you can see some information on the right-hand side of the screen to a fundraiser that we have started. More information is in the description or comment section of this video. Thank you. The Squeegee. Jan Demzer, a Polish immigrant and dedicated window washer, started his morning on September 11, 2001 with a quiet breakfast in the North Tower's sky lobby. Coffee in hand, he boarded an express elevator with 5 fellow workers, heading for the 70th floor to begin their workday. Suddenly, the elevator lurched and began a terrifying freefall. In the chaos and panic, miraculously someone hit the emergency stop, halting their descent. But the doors wouldn't open. As panic set in, smoke began seeping into the car. Eventually they managed to pry the doors open, only to confront a solid sheetrock wall with the number 50 written on it. As an express elevator, it didn't stop on the 50th floor. Nevertheless, Jan and his co-workers refused to give in to despair. Jan looked down at his bucket and brass squeegee, and using the sharp metal squeegee blade, he and others were able to break through the first 2 layers of drywall. As Jan's hand began to grow tired, he dropped the blade down the elevator shaft. Annoyed with himself, he grabbed the handle of the squeegee and hit the wall as hard as he could. The other men in the elevator helped by punching and kicking until they made a hole in the wall that was big enough for them to crawl through. They reached what turned out to be the wall of a men's bathroom beneath a sink. Through that gap, they escaped onto a stairwell and descended 50 flights to safety, just 5 minutes before the North Tower collapsed. After escaping the towers, Jan walked uptown to his wife's office, and together they eventually made their way home to Jersey City. When asked a year later if he would return to work as a window washer, he replied, "I'll go back, but when I do, I only want to clean windows that I can reach with a ladder." The Unsolved Murder on 9/11. September 11, 2001 will always be remembered for the deaths of nearly 3,000 innocent people. However, there was a lesser-known fatality that day, also in New York City, which was completely unrelated to the tragedy. Henryk Siwiak was a Polish immigrant who came to the United States in search of a better life. Born in Krakow, he had worked as a geologist before moving abroad, hoping to support his wife and 2 children back home. In early 2001, he arrived in New York City, where he took on a variety of temporary jobs while struggling to improve his English. Friends described him as hard-working and optimistic, determined to succeed despite the difficulties of starting over in a new country. While on September 11, 2001, while New York was plunged into chaos and grief after the terrorist attacks on the World Trade Center, Siwiak prepared for his first night of work at a temporary cleaning job in a Pathmark supermarket in Brooklyn. He left his apartment in Queens late that night, intending to travel by subway and then walk to the store. Because he was unfamiliar with the area and unable to ask for clear directions, he became lost and his journey led him into the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighborhood, where crime was common at that time, and tensions were high in the aftermath of the attacks. Just before midnight, Siwiak was randomly shot on Decatur Street near Albany Avenue. Witnesses later reported hearing gunfire and seeing him stumble before collapsing. Police and emergency services were quickly called, but his injuries were fatal and he died at the scene. Curiously, his wallet and personal belongings were not taken, which led investigators to doubt robbery as a motive. Unfortunately for Siwiak, his murder occurred while the city's resources were stretched thin due to the devastation downtown, resulting in it receiving little to no publicity. But because New York City does not include the nearly 3,000 people who died in the terrorist attacks in its official crime statistics, Siwiak is recorded as the only homicide victim in the city on September 11, 2001. His murder has never been solved, and despite occasional appeals for information, no suspects have ever been identified. For his family in Poland, the loss was not only a personal tragedy, but also a cruel irony. He had survived the dangers of that day's historic attacks, only to become the sole victim of an unsolved street killing. More than 2 decades later, the mystery surrounding his death remains an unusual and haunting footnote in the history of 9/11. Supernatural events. In the long shadow cast by September 11th, stories began to emerge that transcended typical expressions of grief and remembrance. Survivors, first responders, local residents, and those personally affected by the events shared accounts of vivid dreams, unexplained phenomena, and what they believed to be paranormal experiences. We wanted to share just a few of these stories that people interpreted as supernatural following 9/11, starting with the tale of a firefighter's wife and her locket. In an interview, Denise Olson, the widow of FDNY Ladder 10 firefighter Jeffrey Olson, shared a remarkable story about the day her husband died. On the morning of September 11th, Denise stepped into the shower, leaving the bathroom door slightly ajar so she could hear reports of the chaotic events unfolding in New York City. At the very moment the North Tower collapsed in a cloud of dust and debris, it felt as though an invisible force had yanked the delicate locket from her neck, a cherished gift from her husband on their wedding day. As the locket clattered onto the shower floor, in that instant, she sensed with absolute certainty that Jeff had died, and she was right. Many believe this is undeniable proof of spirituality. Following on from this, several recovery workers at the Fresh Kills landfill on Staten Island, where much of the debris from the World Trade Center was sifted, later told author and former NYPD Lieutenant Frank Mara that they repeatedly saw what appeared to be a World War II-era Red Cross worker, an African-American woman in white, quietly offering sandwiches and coffee before mysteriously vanishing. Mara documented these occurrences using accounts from multiple witnesses in his 2015 book, From Landfill to Hallowed Ground. Mara was quoted as saying, whether these sightings were the result of a ghost or stress-induced visions, the story became a powerful piece of recovery lore among the crews, who considered the site to be hallowed ground. Another perceived sign from above is the World Trade Center cross, which consists of a pair of steel beams that formed a cruciform shape found near World Trade Center 6 on September 13, 2001. While not exactly supernatural in nature, it is often regarded as a sign, and after its discovery, the cross became a makeshift shrine for recovery workers and families. Today the cross is housed in the 9/11 Memorial and Museum, and for many people, its survival during such chaos felt more like a meaningful coincidence than merely an accident. In the aftermath of 9/11, many more individuals reported experiencing unexplained supernatural phenomena, prompting Bonnie McErney, a widow of a victim from that tragic day, to compile these accounts into her book, Messages, Signs, Visits, and Premonitions from Loved Ones Lost on 9/11. In the book, families recount their experiences of vivid dreams that occurred before the attacks, unusual electrical flickers, lingering scents, and encounters they interpreted as visits or comforting signs from their loved ones after the tragedy. Mainstream media outlets reported on this project at the time, while some skeptics argued that many of these anecdotes were a result of grief. These accounts continue to hold deep significance for those who experienced the events or lost loved ones to the atrocities. Stolen cars. In the immediate aftermath of the 9/11 attacks, there was no widespread incidence of looting in the city, despite some social media reports suggesting otherwise, and the prevailing memory of that time is not one of looting, but rather of collective resilience, with thousands of ordinary people, first responders and volunteers coming together for rescue and recovery efforts. So you can imagine the shock when in 2004, one of those heroic rescuers made a shocking confession. On the day of the attacks, William Bennett, a 52-year-old technician with the Secret Service and a retired NYPD sergeant, assisted in evacuating people from 7 World Trade Center. For his bravery, he was later awarded a Medal of Valor by the Secret Service. In the aftermath of the events, he was responsible for managing the vehicles recovered from Ground Zero. However, instead of properly processing these vehicles, many of which were feared to be contaminated with asbestos and glass shards, he misused his authority. Instead of allowing the cars to be properly crushed at a Staten Island landfill or disposed of according to protocol, he falsely classified them as destroyed and kept them for himself, diverting 5 usable government vehicles to family members. Court documents reveal that Bennett arranged for one vehicle, a 2001 Chevrolet Impala, to be given to his daughter, Additionally, 2 other vehicles, a 2001 Ford Taurus and a 1998 Mercury Sable, were delivered to his mother in North Carolina. He also stole a 1994 Plymouth Acclaim and a 1994 Ford Taurus by using fabricated documentation and sales receipts. Bennett claimed to have sold 3 of these vehicles at a Queens auto repair shop for over $10,000, representing a total value of nearly $35,000. Many believe that he had shamelessly taken advantage of the carnage of 9/11 for his own personal gain. His actions brought shame to both the victims and the courageous efforts of the Secret Service, whose members have become heroes in the aftermath of 9/11. In court, Bennett's attorney attempted to explain his behavior by suggesting that it may have been influenced by trauma he experienced while working at the 7 World Trade Center on the day of the attacks. Ultimately, Bennett received a sentence of 6 months probation without a fine, which many believe is relatively lenient given the circumstances of the crime. What do you think of this one? "27 hours at Ground Zero." On the morning of September 11, 2001, Janelle Guzman McMillan arrived at her office on the 64th floor of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. It was a bright, clear day, and nothing suggested that the ordinary rhythm of her work life would soon be shattered. She settled in at her desk, exchanged words with colleagues, and then at 8:46 a.m., the tower shook violently. Unbeknownst to her and her colleagues, Flight 11 had crashed into the floors above. At first, no one knew what had happened. The building trembled, the lights flickered, and the smell of burning jet fuel began to seep through the air. Panic rippled across the office. Some wanted to stay put, believing rescue would come quickly, but others urged immediate evacuation. Guzman decided to leave with a group of co-workers, heading towards the stairwell. The descent was crowded and tense. Hundreds of people moved downward, step by step, clutching handrails, whispering prayers and offering reassurance. On the way down, brave firefighters passed them, climbing upward with heavy gear. By the time her group reached the 13th floor, everything had changed. A deafening roar surged through the tower, and at 10:28 a.m., the North Tower collapsed. The walls and floors gave way, and in an instant, the stairwell disintegrated. Guzman was thrown to the ground as tons of steel and concrete rained down. Dust filled her lungs and darkness swallowed everything. She was completely trapped. Pinned under rubble, her right leg twisted beneath her, she could not move. Her head and one arm were free, but the rest of her body was immobilized. Even breathing was a struggle. Then there was the eerie silence, broken only by the distant sound of creaking metal and fires burning. Hours passed as Guzman drifted between fear, pain, and unconsciousness. In that darkness, she prayed. At first her thoughts were desperate, pleas for water, for air, for someone to find her. But as exhaustion deepened, her prayers became more resolute. She promised God that if He spared her, she would change her life. She would devote herself to faith, live with purpose, and not take life for granted. Though she was physically alone, she later recalled feeling as if a presence was with her. The hours stretched into a full day. She could hear faint movements at times, but no one responded to her calls. Dust coated her mouth and throat, making speech nearly impossible. She shifted slightly, trying to free her hand, and finally managed to push her fingers through a small gap in the rubble. And then, after 27 hours, a voice broke through the silence. A rescue worker called Paul felt a touch and called for his team. With careful effort, they cleared the debris around her and successfully lifted her out alive. She was the last person to be rescued from the wreckage of the Twin Towers. Her survival was truly miraculous. Severely injured, she was rushed to a hospital where her long recovery began. Guzman now shares her story as a testament to faith, hope, and resilience. From the ruins, she emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, committed to a life of gratitude, humility, and spiritual devotion that continues to this day. A true tale of survival. So that's it for this video. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and our heart goes out to all of those affected by 9/11.